Hi, this is Jaya. In this video, we shall see about the arrival of East India Company and the associated impact. Between early 1600s and mid 19th century, the British East India Company led the establishment and expansion of international trade to Asia and subsequently leading to economic and political domination of the entire Indian subcontinent. It all started when the East India Company, or the Governor and Company of Merchants of London, trading with the East Indies as it was originally named, obtained a royal charter from Queen Elizabeth I granting it monopoly at the trade with the East. Monopoly means only they can do the trading, no one else can do. A joint stock company, shares owned primarily by British merchants and aristocrats, the East India Company had no direct link to the British government. Through the mid 1700s and early 1800s, the company came to account for half of the world's trade. They traded mainly in commodities exotic to Europe and Britain like cotton, indigo, salt, silk, saltpeter, opium, and tea. Soon they became the heralding agents of British colonial imperialism. For the first 150 years, the East India Company's presence was largely confined to the coastal areas. It soon began to transform from a trading company to a ruling endeavor following their victory in the Battle of Plassey against the ruler of Bengal, Siraj ud Dowlah, in the year 1757. Warren Hastings, the first Governor General, laid down the administrative foundations for the subsequent British consolidation. The revenues from Bengal were used for economic and military enrichment of the company. Under directives from Governor Generals Wellesley and Hastings, expansion of British territory by invasion or alliances was initiated, with the company eventually acquiring major parts of present-day India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. In 1857, the Indians raised their voice against the company and its oppressive rule by breaking out into an armed rebellion, which historians termed as the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857. The company lost its power following the Government of India Act of 1858. The company's armed forces, territories, and possessions were taken over by the Crown. The East India Company was formally dissolved by the Act of Parliament in 1874, which marked the commencement of the British Raj in India. The British East India Company was formed to claim their share in the East Indian spice trade. The British were motivated by the immense wealth of the ships that made the trip there and back from the East. The East India Company was granted the Royal Charter on 31st December 1600 by Queen Elizabeth I. The charter conceded the company monopoly of all English trade in lands washed by the Indian Ocean from the southern African peninsula to Indonesian islands in Southeast Asia. The company was owned entirely by the stockholders and managed by a governor with a board of 24 directors. The first voyage of the company left in February 1601 under the commandership of Sir James Lancaster and headed for Indonesia to bring black pepper and fine spices. The four ships had a arduous journey reaching Bantam in Java in 1602. They left behind a small group of merchants and associates and returned back to England in 1603. The second voyage was commanded by Sir Henry Middleton. The third voyage was undertaken between 1607 and 1610 with General William Keeling aboard the Red Dragon, Captain William Hawkins aboard the Hector, and the Captain David Middleton directing the Consent. The company's ships first arrived in India at the port of Surat in 1608. In 1615, Sir Thomas Roe reached the court of the Mughal Emperor Nuruddin Salim Jahangir as the emissary of King James I to arrange for a commercial treaty and gained for the British the right to establish a factory at Surat. A treaty was signed with the British promising the Mughal Emperor all sorts of rarities and rich goods fit for my palace in return for his generous patronage. Trading interests soon collided with establishments from other European countries like Spain, Portugal, France, and Netherlands. The British East India Company soon found itself engaged in constant conflicts over trading monopoly in India, China, and Southeast Asia with its European counterparts. After the Ambonia massacre in 1623, the British were ousted from Indonesia, then known as the Dutch East Indies. Losing horribly to the Dutch, the company concentrated on India, a territory they previously considered as a consolation prize. Under the secure blanket of imperial patronage, the British gradually outcompeted the Portuguese trading endeavours, Estada India, and over the years oversaw a massive expansion of trading operations in India. The British company's win over the Portuguese in a maritime battle off the coast of India won them the most desired trading concessions from the Mughal Empire. In 1611, its first factories were established in India in Surat, followed by acquisition of Madras in 1639, Bombay in 1668, and Calcutta in 1690. The Portuguese bases at Goa, Bombay, and Chittagong were ceded to the British authorities as the dowry of Catherine of Braganza, Queen Consort of Charles II of England. Numerous trading posts were established along the east and west coast of India, and most conspicuous of English establishments developed around Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras, the three most important trading ports at that time. Each of these three provinces allowed the East India Company to command a monopoly of trade routes more effectively over the Indian Ocean. The company started steady trade in cotton, silk, indigo, saltpeter, and an array of spices from South India. In 1711, the company established its permanent trading post in Canton, province of China, and started trading of tea in exchange for silver. By the end of 1715, in a bid to expand trading activities, the company had established solid trade footings in ports around the Persian Gulf, Southeast and East Asia. In 1694, the House of Commons voted that all the subjects of England had an equal right to trade to the East Indies unless prohibited by Act of Parliament, under pressure from wealthy influential tradesmen not associated with the company. Following this, the English company trading to the East Indies was founded with a state-backed indemnity of £2 million. To maintain financial control over the new company, existing stockholders of the old company paid a hefty sum of £315,000. The new company could hardly make a dent in the established old company markets. The new company was ultimately absorbed by the old East India Company in 1708. A tripartite venture was established between the state, the old and the new trading companies under the banner of United Company of Merchants of England trading to the East Indies. The following few decades saw a bitter tug of war between the company lobby and the British Parliament to acquire permanent establishment rights, which the latter was hesitant to relinquish in view of the immense profits the company brought. The United Company lent to the government an additional of £1,200,000 without interest in exchange of renewal of charter until 1726. In 1730, the charter was renewed until 1766 in exchange of the East India Company lowering the interest on the remaining debt amount by 1% and contributed another £200,000 to the Royal Treasury. In 1743, they loaned the government another £1,000,000 at 3% interest, and the government prolonged the charter until 1783. Effectively, the company brought monopoly of trading in the East Indies by bribing the government. At every juncture, when this monopoly was expiring, it could only effect a renewal of its charter by offering fresh loans and by fresh presents to the government. The French were later to enter the Indian trading markets and consequently entered into fresh rivalry with the British. By the 1740s, rivalry between the British and the French was becoming acute. The 7 Years' War between 1756 and 1763 effectively stumped out the French threat led by the Governor General Robert Clive. This set up the basis of colonial monopoly of East India Company in India. By the 1750s, the Mughal Empire was in a state of decadence. The Mughals, threatened by the British fortifying Calcutta, attacked them. Although the Mughals were able to acquire a victory in that face-off in 1756, their victory was short-lived. The British recaptured Calcutta later that same year. The East India Company forces went on to defeat the local royal representatives at the Battle of Plassey in 1757 and at Buxar in 1764. Following the Battle of Buxar in 1764, the Mughal Emperor signed a treaty with the company, allowing them to oversee the administration of the province of Bengal in exchange for a revised revenue amount every year. Thus began the metamorphosis of a mere trading concern to a colonial authority. The East India Company became responsible for administering the civil, judicial, and revenue systems in one of India's richest provinces. The arrangements made in Bengal provided the company direct administrative control over a region and subsequently led to a 200 years of colonial supremacy and control. Throughout the next century, the East India Company continued to annex territory after territory until most of the Indian subcontinent was effectively under their control. From the 1760s onwards, the government of Britain pulled the reins of the company more and more in an attempt to root out corruption and abuse of power. As a direct repercussion of the military actions of Robert Clive, the Regulating Act of 1773 was enacted, which prohibited people in the civil or military establishments from receiving any gift, reward, or financial assistance from Indians. This act directed the promotion of the Governor of Bengal to the rank of Governor General over the entire company controlled India. It also provided that nomination of Governor General, though made by a court of directors, would be subject to the approval of the Crown in conjunction with a council of 4 leaders appointed by the Crown in future. A Supreme Court was established in India. The judges were appointed by the Crown to be sent out to India. William Pitt's India Act established government authority over political policy making, which needed to be approved through a parliamentary regulatory board. It imposed the Board of Control, a body of 6 commissioners above the company directors in London, consisting of Chancellor of the Exchequer and a Secretary of State for India, together with the 4 councillors appointed by the Crown. In 1830, the company's monopoly of the Indian trade was abolished, and under the 1833 Charter Act, it lost its China trade monopoly as well. In 1854, the British government in England ruled for the appointment of a Lieutenant Governor to oversee regions of Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha, and the Governor General was directed to govern the entire Indian colony. The company continued its administrative functions until the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857. The brutal and rapid annexation of native Indian states by introduction of unscrupulous policies like the doctrine of lapse, or on the grounds of inability to pay taxes along with forcible renunciation of titles, sparked widespread discontent among the country's nobility. Moreover, tactless efforts at social and religious reforms contributed to spread of discomfiture among the common people. The sorry state of Indian soldiers and their mistreatment compared to their British counterparts in the armed forces of the company provided the final push towards the first real rebellion against the company's governance in 1857, known as the Sepoy Mutiny. What began as soldiers' protests soon took epic proportions when disgruntled royalties joined forces. The British forces were able to curb the rebels with some effort, but the mutiny resulted in major loss of face for the company and adversed its inability to successfully govern the colony of India. In 1858, the Crown enacted the Government of India Act and assumed all governmental responsibilities held by the company. They also incorporated the company-owned military force into the British Army. The East India Stock Dividend Redemption Act was brought in effect on January 1, 1874, and the East India Company was dissolved in its entirety. Although the East India Company's colonial rule was hugely detrimental to the interest of the common people due to the exploitative nature of governance and tax implementation, there is no denying the fact that it brought forward some interesting positive outcomes as well. One of the most impactful of them was the complete handover of the justice system and establishment of the Supreme Court. Next big important impact was the introduction of the postal system and telegraph, which the company arguably established for its own benefit in 1837. The East Indian Railway Company was awarded the contracts to construct a 120-mile railway from Howrah, Calcutta to Raniganj in 1849. The transport system in India saw improvements in leaps and bounds with the completion of a 21-mile rail line from Bombay to Thane, the first leg of the Bombay Kalyan line in 1853. The British also brought forth social reforms by abolishing immoral indigenous practices through acts like the Bengal Sati Regulation in 1829, prohibiting immolation of widows, the Hindu Widows Remarriage Act 1856, enabling adolescent Hindu widows to remarry and not live a life of unfair austerity. Establishment of several colleges in the principal presidencies of Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras was undertaken by the company governors. These institutions contributed towards enriching young minds, bringing to them a taste of world literature, philosophy, and science. The educational reforms also included encouragement of native citizens to sit for the civil service exam and observing them into the service consequently. The company is popularly associated with unfair exploitations of its colonies and widespread corruption. The humongous amounts of taxes levied on agriculture and business led to man made famines such as the Great Bengal Famine of 1770 and subsequent famines during the 18th and 19th centuries. Forceful cultivation of opium and unfair treatment of indigo farmers led to much discontent, resulting in widespread military protest. The positive aspects of social, education, and communication advancement were overshadowed largely by the plundering attitude of the company rule, stripping its dominions bare for profit. If you have anything more to add on to what I've said, please write it in the comment box, like the video, share it with your friends, and if you're not subscribed my channel, please subscribe and support. Thank you.